Hello. Last time I believe we were talking about creativity, and we marked a path from discussing the conscious and the unconscious, which led us into what is meditation, which we defined as relaxing the conscious mind so that it can receive the impress of the unconscious. And then we got into the question of knowledge, and the working definition that I gave for knowledge was the marriage of wisdom and understanding, which can be applied as opinion and skill in the world. From there we went on to talk about creativity, and we came up to the threshold of describing the process of creativity. So that's one route we can take today, to actually break it down, because I've already introduced creativity via an analogy with procreativity. We've talked about how when a baby is born, the sperm and egg fuse to form an embryo, a fertilized ovum, which can then develop as a ball of cells and be implanted in the uterus and be carried to term over a gestation period. And I suggested that something analogous happens spiritually in the process of creativity, because we are bringing to birth something. And there are those two levels of the mind that we began talking about at the very beginning, the unconscious and the conscious, are coming into a spiritual relationship and constellating a germ of a creative project. This would be the spiritual equivalent of making love and engendering new life. So it's as though the human soul is making love with the oversoul or some higher power, and out of that interaction is the seed, the embryo of some creative project. It doesn't matter whether it's in the arts or the sciences or in industry. Or in political reform, or in monetary reform. So related to creativity, the concept of work. Work is important because it's an outgrowth of creativity. The work I'm interested in talking about, one's natural work, not the job you have to do, but the work that you are born to do. And so from the outset, I think it's worth distinguishing these two modes of cognition and action. Life consists of work and leisure, doesn't it? You're either at work or it's leisure time, just to keep it really simple. Now, what I'm suggesting is that work reposes on creation and leisure is about recreation. Recreation, that's another word for leisure.
Got to balance the two out.
You've got to, yes, we hear a lot.
To feel healthy.
Yes, we hear a lot these days about the work-life balance. But not only do we need to balance them in the sense of apportioning the right amount of time to either, we need to understand their integral connection and how they feed each other. Because what I want to suggest and to offer for the audience's consideration today is that our recreation feeds our creation, and our creation then directs our recreation. In your leisure hours, for example, you want to be broadening and rounding out yourself with different life experiences which enrich you and make you more of an informed specialist when you come to do your creative work. Because whenever we offer a bit of creative work to the world, we are specializing in some capacity. But let's say you're a marine biologist. And again, I'm talking about the work you love. There are many ways we can approach it, but I'm saying that the work you are born to do, if that has a ring of truth about it to you, then follow where I'm going with this. Let's say marine biology is the work you are born to do. Then you could just narrow your mind perpetually, continuously, and just learn more and more about that one subject area.
Until you become an expert at it.
Yeah, you'll become an expert, and certainly you have to do a certain amount of that to become expert in your field, or even competent in your field, so that you can offer marine biology to the world. Another way of making yourself more competent is to be a well-rounded human being who understands how things all fit together. Because if you're to, and remember, we're going right back to meditation, concentration, intuition, and I said that intuition contextualizes everything. It shows you how one piece of knowledge is related to every other piece of knowledge. It shows you how one mind is connected to every other mind, as well as to that deeper part of the mind that we call the unconscious. And we hear a lot of words tossed around, the subconscious, the superconscious. They are also the unconscious. In case you're confused, subconscious has that additional layer of meaning that it arises more from our lower or our animal nature, our instincts and so on. So there could be instincts and primitive emotions that are impelling us that we're not consciously aware of or rationally in control of, as when Sigmund Freud talked about the promptings of the id. On the other hand, you have the superconscious, which is an aspect of the unconscious. Calling it super is to suggest that sometimes we get inklings and promptings that seem to come from above rather than from below, that seem to be inspired by a higher intelligence rather than something somatic or evolutionary, like sometimes they seem to be inspired by angels or by something celestial or something divine. So how did I get here? Yes, we're talking about intuition, which is one of the fruits of learning to meditate, learning to relax the conscious and draw download, if you like, content from the unconscious into consciousness. And intuition contextualizes things, so our marine biologist, it would help them, surely, wouldn't it, to know about how climate affects the oceans. So in their spare time, they may take an interest in climatology or the environmental movement or something like that. It may help them to, if they're talking about the natural world and sea creatures, it may help them, I don't know, to have a few goldfish at home in a tank, or domestic pets. Because then when they speak about the animal world, which they have to do as specialists, they have direct personal experience of relationship with animals. Maybe they've gone horse riding. Maybe they've gone on safari. Maybe they own animals and have become whisperers to animals in some ways. So you can see that there's a great range of things that could improve the work of our marine biologist that are outside of marine biology. It's not just about studying more marine biology. Let's say that marine biologist has to present conferences and seminars in their leisure time. They might take a look at what best practice is in the world of presentation, speech making, and so on. They might want to improve their literary skills so that they can write reports better. So it's not that difficult to understand how our recreation can fuel our creation. Our leisure can fuel our work. And it works the other way too, in the sense of our creative work directing our recreative leisure. We're recreating because that marine biology is a multifaceted field. Each facet connects with some other field of human aspiration and endeavour. And in the leisure time, a person can look at those other areas. So there's one big continuum, one big feedback. Our work informs our leisure, which informs our work, which informs our leisure, which informs our work. Now, I talked about meditation, and I believe that it's the meditative disposition of mind can really enrich our leisure time, our recreation. And it also helps to build a sense of community. On the other hand, it's the concentrated disposition of mind, that aptitude to concentrate the mind exclusively on one thing and drill down more and more deeply, getting more and more detail, intensively diving into this specialized area. It's that aptitude which produces valuable work. So we need to wear one hat or one kind of brain for work, and we need to wear another kind of brain for leisure. Now I want to introduce the pathway of creativity. We've drawn the analogy with procreativity. So the idea that there should be stages to creativity, stages to the manifestation of a creative project, shouldn't be that far-fetched, because we know that there are stages to procreativity. There's gametogenesis, when the sperm and egg are made in the body of the adults. There's the fusion, the conception, that's another stage. There's implantation and growth in the womb. We even have different words for different stages of development to talk about the entity that's coming to be. We talk about the embryo at an early stage, and we talk about the fetus at a later stage, and then we talk about the newborn, the neonate. Well, similarly, on the creative side, we can say that there are 4 stages, and I'm going to designate them will, purpose, plan, and implementation. Will, purpose, plan, and implementation. Now, all cultural renewal begins with will. And will means something more than just self-will. Will is like a force of the universe. Will is that force that brings to that is the impetus behind any form of cultural renewal, whether it be a new musical composition or genre, or a new mod con that industry has produced. It begins with will. Our sense of our own will or volition can fall short of the ideal of will. For the religious that are hearing this, you probably recognize the will of God or the supreme will of the universe, something sovereign that directs and governs everything that comes to pass in the natural world, in the cultural world, and so on. And it follows that you'd want to be on the right side of that will. Because not to be would be to continually be frustrated. All the efforts that you think you're making, all the things that you think you want, where your desires are applied, will ultimately end in frustration if you're on the wrong side of the sovereign will that directs everything in the universe, from the explosion of a star to the developments in society and politics and culture. If you're not a believer, if you're agnostic or atheist, then what I'm asking you to do is to posit the ideal of will. If it doesn't exist, imagine it. If it doesn't, if for you all that exists is clashing human wills that are always locked in a struggle, but there's no will that is without opposition, which is irresistible, then you have to imagine that this is the ideal. We all want things, and sometimes it turns out that we get what we want, and sometimes it doesn't. Why is there so much wishing in the world? Well, there's a lot of wishing. It would seem that we wish a lot because we can't will. I can wish that I could get out of that door or leave this room. Let's say I'm a prisoner. But if it is within my power to go up there and open the door and walk out, I don't need to wish about it, not for a moment. I may wish that things are different in my life or in the world. There are many things that I hear people wishing about. They wish for an end to violence in certain places. They wish for more money. They wish for this, that, and the other. They wish for the perfect partner. If you could do something about it, if you could will it to happen, you wouldn't need to wish. But for something to come to be, it's not just enough to desire or want, because there's what you want. You tell yourself you want X, but under that, there's what you really want. And with a nod to the Spice Girls, we could say that under that, there's what you really, really, really want.
Law of attraction.
I don't know. It may not be a law of attraction.
I don't believe in that. No.
What I'm saying is that I think that if we know ourselves, then what we really, really, really want is in conformity with that ideal of will. Capital W will, if you like. And my will is lowercase will. And it's to do with my volition and my choice making. So I think that creativity, it comes from beyond us. Because this will is transcendental in a sense. It's beyond us. To get to know this will, we need to be perpetually engaged in a project of self-transcendence. And what I've called wisdom can also be understood as the ability to discern what that will is saying, where that will is prompting me. Because then I can choose to move with it. And I'm constantly seeking the alignment of my creative energies with the creative forces of the universe. It's an ideal, I know. But if you believe that you were born to do certain work, there's the work that you were born to do. And it's not just the job that you happen to need at the moment to make ends meet. Then I think I'm talking to you because I'm talking about aligning yourself with the will that sets the galaxies in motion. That will that sets the galaxies in motion can set the projects in motion in your life, because you become a co-creator.
I think that you spend a large portion of your life working. If it's not something that you feel compelled to do, it's going to be a disaster.
Yes, and it's my hope that more and more human beings will...
It's a wasted life.
Will find a way to fulfill their potential and embrace their true work. And this brings us to the point of power. Now we're still on this first stage of will, but you hear the word power used sometimes, and power can often be used as a pejorative. We think of people with bad agendas wielding too much power. But there's good power and there's bad power. Power is just a force. There's the power to do evil and there's the power to do good. And what I think we find objectionable is the power that's exercised over people to dominate. It's a power that depends upon disempowering other people. I said in a previous episode that wherever people are willing to give their power away, nature abhors the vacuum. And so there will be another group of people who are more than willing to step in and take up that power and use it to dominate, hold in subjection, and direct the first group of people who gave up their power. It's odious. It's objectionable. Is that what we're working for? Is that the only form of power? I don't think so. I think there is another form of power. The other type of power is not power over anybody, it's power over oneself. And it arises ideally, again, I'm just trying to sketch the ideal, as will makes its presence felt in your life, as you own that as your will, as I own that as my will. That is what power is. So power is the movement of will, which again comes from beyond me, but as it breaks into my consciousness and sweeps my volition, my choice-making capacity, along with it, the experience of being borne along by this current of will is power. That's what we experience as the rush of power. But it is good power, because it is power that is allied to the creative power of the universe, as I say. So the first step is to find a way to own will, so that my will and will come into alignment. The second step of the creative process, which I've called purpose, is a sharing step. Because just as, in a sense, one is co-creating with will, one needs to co-create with other people. And that's what purpose is. As I've said before, common purpose is a kind of tautology, because as it's being described here, purpose needs to be common. It needs to be shared. Own will and share purpose. That's what I'm saying. There are many co-workers that belong in your circle. And as your wisdom and experience grows, you're able to identify them. These co-workers, you're able to identify over time. And you're moving into each other's orbits. They are singing to their own song sheet, and you're singing off your song sheet. But there's a sense that the two song sheets are strains within a larger song. That maybe there's a symphonic effect going on. Their voice, your voice, their musical instrument, your musical instrument, but you're collaborating initially unconsciously. Have you noticed that somebody whom you may not even know has been working on something for some time in another location, and you've been working in your location, and then at a point down the track, not only do you recognize each other's work, but you recognize the synergy that exists between your work and their work, and that they were two components of a larger work. They were petals on a rose. They were little solos within a larger symphonic performance. This happens. And it happens in history too. Because in the field of mathematics, there was a mathematician called Leibniz in Germany who was working on the calculus. Concurrently in England, Isaac Newton was working on the same project. They didn't have knowledge of what the other was doing. There's not only synergy, there's synchronicity there. The calculus was an idea whose time had come. An idea whose time to enter into the culture had come. This would be a new idea that would be birthed at this time. And where there is this idea and the will that puts it in motion, you will find that a lot of minds who are tuning along these lines, that idea will appeal to minds in diverse places, of diverse backgrounds, and they'll each be trying to conceive this new cultural phenomenon that is becoming, that is about to be born, and they'll have their different takes on it. And of course, with the division of labour, there's work enough for everybody to do. There's no need for doubling up, because there is a work that you can do that has your name on it, that is uniquely yours. And really it is not given to someone else to do, because it requires somebody of your unique set of experiences and background and so on to carry it out. But it will have synergy with other people's work. As I say, this simultaneity of creativity we can see happening in big cultural creations like the calculus in the 1600s. The theory of evolution had a similar story. There was a young biologist whose name has slipped my mind at the moment, but he was working in Southeast Asia and developing a very similar theory to the one that Darwin was developing, and they didn't have contact. It was as though the theory of evolution was floating in the ethers, and the minds that were receptive, that were interested, were receiving facets of it. Great ideas are often given to clusters of minds. It's almost like the idea is too big to be held by any one human consciousness. It has to be shared. Different aspects of it have to be shared across multiple human minds. And these human minds have a common purpose. And that brings us to the third stage of plan, because human beings can be cooperating at an unconscious level, as I say. But the next stage is about bringing it to a conscious level. And to do that, it helps to be able to have an objective statement of what you and your co-workers are on about, to have it down there in black and white. So it's not just about my impression or your impression. There is a plan which can then give birth to a program Because when a number of people can subscribe to a plan, as they do with a business plan or with a political platform, then the creative project gets very energized and it pushes closer to manifestation. And the last stage, implementation, is about the steps that need to be taken. See, something comes to birth in a stepwise fashion, and we must pay heed to timing. Because everything is born in space and time. Space conditions existence, but time conditions consciousness. Time is part of the structure of consciousness. And so our implementation has to do with timing and scheduling things. And that's the way things play out in the world. It's as though there is a whole symphony that the composer has created, and it's there on the sheet music in its entirety. But when you go to the opera house or the symphony hall to hear it played in real time, you don't get it in its entirety. You get it in its movements. And so there is a sequence of movements that are played. And within that, there's a sequence of musical phrases and musical notes. It's the same with a play, isn't it? You've probably got on your shelf at home a play by William Shakespeare, and there it is within the covers of the book. You may even have the completed works of William Shakespeare. So all his works are there within the covers of a book in their entirety, in the plan, the blueprint, if you like. The blueprint, it's there, it's been worked out. Shakespeare's thought it through, right down to the minor stage directions. But for the play to be performed in real time, it takes rehearsed actors acting in a playhouse, whether it be the Globe in his day or one of our modern playhouses today. And you could be sitting there, couldn't you, for hours for this play to be played out, to be performed. And that gives you a sense of what implementation and timing is about. Let's say you're at a performance of Hamlet, and it's going to take hours to unfold, of course. But it's not just the fact that the unfoldment takes time. It's also the sequencing. What happens before what and after what. Manifestation is governed by sequencing. So if Ophelia comes forward at the beginning of Hamlet and says something, or if the ghost of the late king comes forward and spills the beans about the plot, he comes forward at a time that he's not supposed to come forward. And what he says doesn't make full sense because you need all the other preceding scenes to make sense of what he's going to say. So you can see that if you get the order of things wrong, it won't work. So all of these considerations apply to that fourth stage of the creative process, which I've called implementation. Very prosaic, I know, but it's an attempt to be descriptive. So just to recapitulate, recreation and creation, leisure and work, feed each other, complement each other. It's the meditative disposition of mind that feeds our recreation hours, and the concentrative disposition of mind that feeds our creative work hours. That connection between the two, that back and forth, that flow, that integration, you can think of as contemplation. So we're meant to lead a contemplative life, as well as an active life. But it's not meant to be a life that's unexamined. And I suppose I'm also saying that we don't need to step outside of life into a hermit's cave or into a monastery in order to have objectivity about life. We need to be aware of life as we're actually living it, so we get the reflection and our lived experience going together. Now, creativity I described as emanating from will. It begins with will, and creativity is there for birthing new things in the cosmos. And within the sphere of human society, we're talking about cultural creation, cultural renewal. And then the way that we participate in this process is through the 4 stages of will, which we need to own, purpose, which we need to share, plan, which we need to formulate and objectify, as when we set it down in writing, and fourthly, implementation, because nothing happens boom like that. It happens according to a timing schedule, everything in its good time. And the sequencing has to be right, because the 3rd step only makes sense if the 2nd step and the 1st step are in place. So there we have it. And we can move from this, but now that we've got a basis to understand work, we can move to a consideration of economy and money from here. But that will be for another episode. Thank you.